Hi guys, this video is going to be talking through some of the concepts in the Arrays PowerPoint. Remember, to get these resources you can go to Blackboard, go to the resources link to do some examples, and there's an example on the screen here that I'm going to talk you guys through, but it will also emphasize the concepts that are in the PowerPoint and also on your worksheets. So remember that when you're creating an array, and this is an array in Java, there's a couple different ways that we can do this. The first way that I set this up was I created an integer array, and then the bracket has to be there if it's an array. Num is the name of my array, and that equals a new int 5, which means that my array is going to have a size of 5 elements. So remember that an array is just a list of values or variables in computer memory. All of those variables share the same name. They share the same data type, so they have the same name, same data type, but they have different addresses and they have different values in the indices. Okay, so for example here, num is the same name for all of these, but and the indices are different, which is really a different address. They're all integers, and each of them has a different value. Now some of the values could be the same. For example, I could do 12 here or assign it whatever I wanted to. In order to do those assignments, I literally typed in the name of the array, bracket, and index, bracket, and then I assigned it a value. Now this last one that I did here would give me what's called an out of bounds error. That out of bounds error is because I've exceeded the index. An array of 5 has 5 elements, but because the indices start at 0, I can only fill it with 0 through 4. So this last one here would be an out of bounds. So I'm going to comment that out for right now. The other thing to keep in mind with arrays is that when you're declaring them, this is probably not the best way. And I'll explain that in just a little bit more in a few minutes when we get to talking about our loop. The for loop is the most common loop that's used with arrays. It's a definite loop, and I know the beginning value, I know the ending value, and I usually increment by 1 with arrays. I copied and pasted some of my previous code, so we need to fix this up now. But I started my index at 0. I went less than 5 to reduce that out of bounds error. And then I'm incrementing by 1. So to output my array elements, I'm going to do something like this. I'm just going to say values, space, and then I'm going to concatenate, and I'm going to print num bracket. And the trick here is to use the variable on your loop, I. That should print num sub 0, then num sub 1, then num sub 2, etc. We're going to see if this works and see if we get our values. So the values are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Now if I wanted to make it a little bit fancier, I could say values, and I could say at position, and then use I to print the position 0 off, and then a space with concatenation and a plus, and execute that code, and I have a typo. It's because I need another plus in between here for concatenation. And if I execute that, then I'm going to get values at position 0, and etc. Should probably have just a single value instead of values, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. So this shows you how to create an array, how to fill an array kind of manually, and then how to print it out. If you remember, in class I talked about the fact that when you declare an array, it is pretty much standard protocol to create a constant variable for the size. That has to be an integer. We name constants with the all capitals, and I'm going to set that value to size to 5. The reason for that is then here when I declare it, I can use that constant, and then I can declare and use that constant down here when I print it out. So if I ever change the size of the array, I only need to change this one line of code if I use that protocol. Another thing that your PowerPoints talk about with the arrays is filling an array. I printed an array, but filling it can also be done by using a loop. So I'm going to copy my loop that I have here, the for loop, and instead of using all of the individual statements up here, I'm going to fill my array using this loop, and I'm going to say num bracket I, which is my index, is going to be equal to, now this is where it gets a little tricky. Because I want it to be filled with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, I'm going to, I've got a couple of choices. I could start my indice at 1 and go to less than or equal to size, and then fill the array with 2 times I. I'm going to see if that's going to give me those same values. I'm going to comment out this section of code here and see if I can fill the array with even numbers by multiplying. So I'm going to have 2 times 1, 2 times 2, etc. is my goal. Let's go ahead and see if that works. And I have another error executing, and it says out of bounds. It says out of bounds because I went to equal the size. Well, that gives you an example of what an index out of bounds error is going to look like, and I should have known that. So I can't start my index at 1. I have to start it at 0, and I could play around figuring out, there is a math formula that I could do to get this to calculate, but also to show you that I could do something like this. I could, outside the loop, start my value at, let's say, 2. Inside the loop, then I could say that I'm going to assign value, and then I'm going to do value is assign value plus 2, so I'm counting by 2's to assign even numbers. And that's going to do the same thing that I had done before. Again, I could figure out a mathematical formula to do that as well, but this is filling the array. When you fill an array like this, that's called populating the array. So you can use a loop to populate an array. You can use a loop to print an array. I have not demonstrated or talked about the parallel arrays, which is in some of our concepts, but the parallel arrays are very similar to what you guys have been doing at Greenfoot. I think I'm going to stop this video right now, go back and look at the PowerPoints and see what else I need to maybe touch base on. So this is just going to be your introductory or just some examples using arrays in Java.